My name is Clara, and I'm 32. Picture this. I'm standing on a sunlit cobblestone street in a tiny Italian town, my suitcase at my feet, heart pounding. My husband Ethan and his friends just sped off in their rental car laughing after a fight. Their taunt echoes. Let's see how she gets back. I'm alone, no phone signal, barely any money, and a stray dog stares at me like it knows I've been betrayed. How did I end up here? Where are you watching from? Hit like if you've ever felt abandoned, and subscribe to hear how I survived this. I stumbled into a cafe, the kind with checkered tablecloths and the smell of fresh espresso. My suitcase thumped against the doorframe, drawing stares from locals. I was still shaking from standing alone on that street, Ethan's laughter ringing in my ears. I slid into a corner booth, hoping to disappear. My phone was useless, no bars, no way to reach him. I kept replaying our fight, his friends' drunken antics, my pleas for a quieter evening, his sneer when he called me a buzzkill. The cafe buzzed with chatter, all in Italian, making me feel like an intruder. I fumbled with my wallet, counting out a few euros, barely enough for coffee. My hands trembled as I dialed Ethan's number on the cafe's old landline, a clunky thing behind the counter. Voicemail. His voice, so familiar, felt like a stranger's. I left a message, my voice cracking. Ethan, where are you? This isn't funny. Please come back. Nothing. Just silence. I hung up my chest tight. The barista, a woman with kind eyes and a name tag reading Maria, slid a steaming cup toward me. On the house, she said softly, her accent warm. You look like you need it. I mumbled thanks, too embarrassed to meet her gaze. My mind churned. Was this really a prank? Ethan had been distant lately, snapping at me over small things like when I spent too long at the library or forgot to iron his shirts, but leaving me stranded. That was a new kind of cruel. Maria lingered, wiping the counter slowly. She asked if I was okay. Her voice gentle but curious. I didn't want to unload, but the words spilled out. My husband and his friends, I said. They drove off after a fight. Left me here. Her face softened and she leaned closer. My sister, she said, went through something like that. A man who thought he could break her. She's stronger now. You will be too. Her words hit me hard, stirring something I couldn't name. I wanted to believe her, but doubt clawed at me. What if Ethan wasn't coming back? What if this wasn't a joke? I sipped the coffee, its bitterness matching my mood. The cafe door swung open and a loud tourist in a bright polo shirt barged in, barking at Maria in broken Italian. He glanced at me, smirking. Lost your tour group, sweetheart. Learn the language next time. His words stung like I was some clueless American out of place and unwanted. I shrank into my seat, my face burning. Maria shot him a sharp look, but he just laughed, ordering his espresso to go. I felt exposed, like everyone could see my shame. My mind raced back to Ethan. Had he always seen me this way, small and out of place? I thought of our wedding, his vows, how he'd promised to stand by me. Now I was alone, clutching a coffee cup, wondering if those promises ever meant anything. The clock on the wall ticked past noon. I'd been in the cafe for hours and still no sign of Ethan. My phone stayed silent, the landline useless. Maria brought me a glass of water, her hand brushing mine. Stay as long as you need, she said, but I knew I couldn't hide here forever. The question was gnawing at me. What next? I had no plan, no money, no idea where to go. And yet Maria's story about her sister kept echoing. She's stronger now. Could I be? I left the cafe as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets. My suitcase rattled behind me, a constant reminder of my limbo. Maria's words about her sister lingered, but they couldn't quiet the panic rising in my chest. I needed a place to stay, somewhere to think. The town felt smaller now, its charm suffocated by my uncertainty. I wandered past a bakery, the smell of fresh bread taunting my empty stomach, and spotted a faded sign for a hostel down a narrow alley. The hostel was a cramped 2-story building with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign. Inside, the air smelled of stale beer and cheap air freshener. A man behind the counter, Paolo, looked up from his newspaper. His eyes scanned me, lingering on my suitcase. One night, I said, sliding my last few euros across the counter. He grunted, handing me a key. "Cash only," he said. No refunds. My room was barely bigger than a closet with a sagging mattress and a single bulb swinging from the ceiling. I sank onto the bed, the springs creaking under me. The walls were thin, and I could hear backpackers laughing in the next room, their voices carefree. I envied them. My fingers traced the edge of my phone, still useless. I opened my photo gallery, scrolling through pictures of Ethan and me. There we were at a barbecue last summer, his arm around me, both of us smiling. When did that version of us disappear? I thought about calling my sister Hannah back in Ohio. But what would I say? My husband ditched me in Italy, and I'm falling apart. I couldn't face her pity. Instead, I pulled out a notebook from my bag, something I used to jot down, book recommendations for the library. I started writing, spilling out my fear and anger. "Ethan, how could you do this?" I wrote. "Was I ever enough for you?" The words blurred as tears hit the page. A knock at the door startled me. Paolo stood there holding a towel. "You forgot this," he said, his tone gruff but not unkind. I mumbled thanks, but he didn't leave. "You okay?" he asked, squinting at me. "You look like you're running from something." His bluntness caught me off guard. "I'm fine," I lied, shutting the door before he could press further. But his question gnawed at me. Was I running, or was I just lost? I lay awake that night, the hostel's noises keeping sleep at bay. Every creak made me hope it was Ethan coming to apologize, to say it was all a mistake. But the hours dragged on, and no one came. My mind drifted to our life back home. Ethan's late nights at the bar with his friends, his eye rolls when I talked about my day, the way he'd dismiss my worries as overreacting. I'd ignored those signs, chalking them up to stress. Now they felt like warnings I'd been too blind to see. By morning, I was exhausted but restless. I needed answers. I dragged my suitcase back to the town square, the early light glinting off the fountain. Locals were setting up market stalls, their chatter a dull hum. I scanned every corner, hoping to spot Ethan's rental car, its red paint unmistakable. Nothing. A group of older women nearby whispered, their eyes darting toward me. I caught the word Americani spoken with a scoff. Were they talking about Ethan's group, their reckless nights at the local bars? I approached a fruit vendor, a wiry man with a kind smile, and asked if he'd seen a group of loud Americans. He nodded, pointing toward the edge of town. "They were here last night," he said. "Drunk, breaking bottles. Left in a hurry." His words hit like a punch. Ethan hadn't just left me. He'd carried on like I didn't exist. My throat tightened, and I thanked the vendor, turning away before he saw my tears. I found a bench by the fountain and sat my suitcase at my feet. The square was waking up, but I felt frozen. A text buzzed on my phone, finally getting a weak signal. It was from Caleb, Ethan's friend, sent hours ago. "You'll figure it out, princess." The word princess burned, dripping with mockery. I stared at the message, my hands shaking. This wasn't a prank anymore. It was a betrayal, cold and deliberate. And I was done waiting for Ethan to fix it. I sat on that bench by the fountain, Caleb's text searing into me. Princess. The word felt like a slap mocking everything I'd tried to be for Ethan. My hands gripped the phone so tight my knuckles whitened. The town square hummed around me, vendors calling out, kids chasing pigeons, but it all blurred into noise. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I was stuck, my suitcase a dead weight beside me. I couldn't stay in that hostel another night, not with Paolo's gruff warnings about payment echoing in my head. I forced myself to move, dragging my bag toward a quieter street. The cobblestones were uneven, and my suitcase wobbled, threatening to tip. My stomach growled, a sharp reminder I hadn't eaten since Maria's coffee. I passed a small grocery store, its window stacked with bright oranges and crusty loaves. My wallet held €1, useless. I kept walking, my eyes scanning for Ethan's red rental car, a desperate habit now. Every engine rev made me flinch, hoping it was him, dreading it was him. The street opened into a small plaza where a street musician sat on a stool strumming a guitar. His melody was slow, haunting, like it was pulling my heartache to the surface. I stopped, rooted, as his fingers danced over the strings. The notes felt personal, like he was playing my story. A few coins glinted in his open case, and without thinking, I dropped my last euro in. It was reckless, stupid even, but it felt like defiance, like I was choosing something for myself, even if it was just a moment of music. The musician glanced up, his eyes crinkling with a nod. I turned away, my throat tight. I didn't want his pity. I didn't want anyone's. But the music followed me as I wandered back toward the square, my mind spiraling. Caleb's text wasn't just cruel. It was proof. Ethan didn't care. Not about me, not about us. I thought of our life back home, the small apartment we'd painted together, the way he'd kiss my forehead before work. But then I saw the other moments, the ones I'd buried. His sighs when I suggested a quiet night in. His smirk when I fumbled at his friends' parties, too shy to keep up with their loud banter. He'd called me boring once, half joking, but it stuck. I found myself back at the hostel, my feet carrying me there on autopilot. Paolo was at the counter flipping through a magazine. He looked up, his brow furrowing. "Back already," he said. "You got cash for tonight?" I shook my head. My voice caught somewhere deep. "I just need a minute," I mumbled, pushing past him to the common area. It was empty. Just a sagging couch and a coffee table littered with travel guides. I sank onto the couch, my suitcase propped against my leg like a shield. My phone buzzed, a weak signal flickering. Another text from Caleb. "Chill out, it's just a joke. Ethan's fine." My blood boiled. A joke, leaving me with nothing in a country where I barely spoke the language. I typed a reply, my fingers shaking. "Tell Ethan to call me. Now." But I deleted it. What was the point? They were laughing at me, all of them. I opened my notebook again, the one I'd scribbled in last night. My pen scratched the page, angry now. "You knew I wrote. You knew he was pulling away, and you stayed anyway." Why? A group of backpackers burst into the room, their laughter jarring. They were young, maybe college kids, with sunburned noses and easy smiles. One of them, a guy with a man bun, glanced at me. "You okay?" he asked, his tone casual. I nodded, forcing a smile, but my face felt like it might crack. They sprawled on the floor, passing around a bag of chips, talking about their next stop. Their freedom stung, a reminder of how trapped I felt. I grabbed my bag and headed for the door, Paolo's voice trailing after me. "Pay by noon tomorrow, or you're out." Outside, the air was cooler, the sun sinking behind the hills. I walked aimlessly, my thoughts a tangle of anger and hurt. Ethan's face kept flashing in my mind, not the smiling one from our wedding, but the cold one from our fight. His eyes hard as he told me to loosen up. I'd trusted him, built my life around him, and now I was nothing to him, just a punchline. The weight of it pressed down, and I stopped leaning against a stone wall, my breath ragged. I couldn't keep waiting for him to show up. But what else could I do? The stone wall was cold against my back, grounding me as my breath hitched. The town was settling into dusk lights flickering on in the windows around me. I felt like a ghost drifting through a place that didn't want me. My suitcase sat at my feet, a tether to a life I wasn't sure I could return to. Caleb's second text kept looping in my head. Chill out, it's just a joke. The cruelty of it twisted deeper like a knife turning slowly. A joke didn't leave you stranded penniless in a foreign country. A joke didn't make you question everything you'd built with someone. I started walking again. No destination, just needing to move. The streets were narrower now, lined with old houses, their shutters painted in fading blues and greens. A woman swept her stoop, glancing at me with mild curiosity. I wanted to ask her for help, to beg for a phone or a ride, but my tongue felt heavy, useless. What would I even say? My husband thinks it's funny to abandon me? The thought of saying it out loud made my stomach churn. I ended up at the edge of town, where the road stretched into darkness, leading to fields and hills. A signpost pointed to the train station a mile away. The idea of leaving flickered, but it felt like giving up. On Ethan, on us, on the hope he'd come back with an apology. I hated how much I still wanted that. I sank onto a low wall by the road, my hands digging into my hair. Memories flooded in, uninvited. Ethan's laugh when we'd dance in our kitchen, his hand warm in mine. But then, the uglier ones, his sharp tone when I'd ask about his late nights, the way he'd brush off my dreams of traveling together, saying I'd hate it that I wasn't adventurous enough. A car sped by, its headlights slicing through the twilight. For a split second, I thought it was Ethan's red rental, and my heart leaped. But it was just a stranger's van kicking up dust. The disappointment crushed me heavier than before. I pulled out my notebook, the pages already creased from last night. My pen scratched furiously. "You let him make you small," I wrote. "You let him decide who you were." The words felt like a confession, raw and shameful. I'd spent years molding myself to fit his world, his friends, his plans. And now, I was paying for it. A rustle in the bushes startled me. A cat darted out, its eyes glinting before it vanished. The silence that followed was oppressive, broken only by the distant hum of the town. I checked my phone again, praying for a signal for anything. Nothing. Just Caleb's texts taunting me. I scrolled through my contacts, pausing at Hannah's name. I imagined her voice warm, but worried, telling me to come home. But home felt like a trap now. A place where I'd have to face the wreckage of my marriage, the pitying looks from friends who'd warned me Ethan was trouble. I stood, my legs shaky, and started back toward the town square. The market was closing, vendors packing up their stalls. I passed a group of men smoking outside a bar, their laughter rough and loud. One of them called out something in Italian, his tone teasing. I didn't understand the words, but the way they chuckled made my skin crawl. I walked faster, my suitcase bouncing behind me. The square was nearly empty now, the fountains trickle louder in the quiet. I stopped staring at the water, its surface catching the last of the light. That's when I overheard them. Two women folding tablecloths at a nearby stall, their voices low but sharp. Americani one said, shaking her head. "Always trouble. Drunk, loud, breaking things." The other nodded, muttering about a bar fight last night, bottles smashed, police called. My heart sank. It had to be Ethan and his friends. They hadn't just left me. They'd torn through this town like a storm, leaving chaos in their wake. And I was the fool left behind cleaning up their mess. I approached the women, my voice barely steady. "Excuse me," I said. "Those Americans? Did they have a red car?" The older woman looked me over, her eyes narrowing. "Yes," she said. "Left this morning. You with them?" I shook my head, my throat tight. "No," I said. "Not anymore." She didn't ask more, just turned back to her work. But her pity stung worse than words. I backed away, my chest heaving. Ethan wasn't just gone. He'd erased me, carried on, like I was nothing. The truth of it hit like a wave, drowning me in anger and grief. I stood there alone, by the fountain, the weight of his betrayal crushing me, and I knew I couldn't stay in this town another second. I couldn't breathe in that square anymore, the fountain's trickle mocking my unraveling. I had to leave, had to escape the weight of Ethan's betrayal before it crushed me completely. The train station was my only way out, a mile down that dark road I'd seen earlier. I gripped my suitcase handle, my palms sweaty, and started walking. The town's lights fading behind me. Each step felt heavier, like I was dragging my entire marriage with me. The night air was cool, but my skin burned with anger, with shame, with the raw sting of being discarded. The station came into view, a low building with a flickering sign and a platform buzzing with travelers. People milled about, some hauling backpacks, others clutching tickets, their voices a jumble of languages. I felt like an outsider, my suitcase rattling too loudly, my eyes red from holding back tears. I checked the schedule board, squinting at the Italian. A train to Rome was leaving in an hour. I counted my euros, my fingers trembling. Just enough for a one-way ticket if I skipped food. It was a risk, but staying here felt like surrender. I joined the ticket line, my heart pounding. The man in front of me argued with the clerk, waving his hands while a family nearby laughed over a shared pastry. Their normalcy made my isolation sharper like a blade. I kept my head down, trying to blend in, but my thoughts screamed. Ethan's face, his cold smirk from our fight, kept flashing. I hated how much I still wanted him to show up to fix this, hated how weak that made me feel. Then, I saw them. Across the street through the station's glass doors, a familiar red car idled by a small cafe. My breath caught. Ethan's rental. I froze, my suitcase tipping slightly. There they were, sprawled at an outdoor table, Ethan, Caleb, and two other friends, their laughter carrying over the hum of the station. Ethan leaned back in his chair, a beer in hand, his face lit by the cafe's warm glow. He looked relaxed, carefree, like he hadn't just torn my world apart. My legs moved before my brain caught up. I abandoned the ticket line, dragging my suitcase across the street, the wheels scraping the pavement. My pulse thundered in my ears. The cafe was crowded, waiters weaving through tables, but I zeroed in on Ethan. He didn't see me coming. Caleb did, though, his eyes widening before a grin spread across his face. "Look who's here," he called, nudging Ethan. The prodigal wife returns. Ethan turned, his expression shifting from surprise to something harder, almost amused. "Clara," he said, setting his beer down. "You made it." His tone was light, like we were playing a game. My hands shook, my voice barely steady. "You left me," I said. "You drove off and left me with nothing." The words came out louder than I meant, drawing glances from nearby tables. Ethan's friends snickered, and Caleb pulled out his phone, angling it toward me. I stepped closer, my suitcase banging against a chair. "Why?" I demanded, my voice cracking. "Why would you do this?" Ethan leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his eyes narrowing. "You were being a drag, Clara," he said. "Always complaining, always ruining the vibe. We thought you needed a lesson." "A lesson?" I repeated, my chest tightening. "You think stranding me in a foreign country is a lesson?" Caleb laughed, his phone still raised, recording. "Chill, princess," he said. "It's just a bit of fun." "Fun?" I wanted to scream. I'd spent 2 days terrified, broke alone while they sat here drinking. Ethan shrugged like it was no big deal. "You're fine, aren't you?" he said. "Figured you'd hitch a ride or something." His words hit like a punch, casual and cruel. I stared at him, the man I'd vowed to love forever, and saw a stranger. My vision blurred, tears burning, but I refused to let them fall. Caleb kept filming, his smirk widening. "This is gold," he muttered. I spun toward him, my anger boiling over. "Stop it," I snapped, reaching for his phone. He jerked it back, laughing. Ethan stood, his voice low. "Don't make a scene, Clara," he said. "You're embarrassing yourself." Embarrassing myself. The irony choked me. I was the one humiliated, abandoned, and now he was scolding me. The cafe seemed to spin, the chatter fading as my world narrowed to this moment, this betrayal, this man who'd promised to protect me and instead broke me. My voice trembled, but I couldn't stop. "You think this is a game, Ethan?" I said, stepping closer, my hands clenched. "You left me with nothing. No money, no plan, no way home." The cafe's chatter dulled, more eyes turning toward us. Ethan's face hardened, his jaw tight. He stood taller, towering over me. "Stop being so dramatic, Clara," he said, his voice cutting. "You always do this, make everything a crisis." His friends nodded, their smirks like daggers, and Caleb's phone stayed trained on me, capturing every shudder in my breath. I felt the ground shift like the world was tilting. Dramatic, I'd spent days scavenging for scraps of hope, sleeping in a dingy hostel while he sat here untouched. I opened my mouth to speak, but Ethan cut me off. "You wanted adventure, right?" he said, his tone mocking. "Well, here's your adventure. Live a little." His words were a blade slicing through the last threads of who I thought we were. The cafe spun, faces blurring into a haze of judgment. Caleb chuckled, zooming in with his phone. "This'll get likes," he said, and something in me snapped. I lunged, grabbing for the phone, my fingers brushing its cold metal. "Get off!" Caleb yelled, yanking it away. The phone slipped, crashing to the pavement, its screen shattering. The cafe went silent, forks, pausing, glasses clinking down. Caleb's face twisted with rage. "You psycho!" he spat, kicking the broken phone toward me. Ethan grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "What is wrong with you?" he hissed. "You're hysterical." Hysterical! The word burned, stripping me bare. I wrenched my arm free, my voice shaking. "I'm hysterical," I said, tears spilling, now hot and unstoppable. "You abandoned me, Ethan. You humiliated me. And for what?" "To prove I'm not fun enough." His friends exchanged glances, their laughter gone, but Ethan's eyes were cold, unyielding. "You did this to yourself," he said, stepping back. "You never fit in. Not with me, not with us." The truth of it crushed me. Never fit in. All those nights I'd tried to be the wife he wanted, laughing at his friends' crude jokes, staying quiet. When he dismissed my ideas, they meant nothing. I was a prop, a placeholder, until he decided I wasn't worth keeping. The cafe's lights seemed too bright, the air too thick. A waiter hovered nearby, muttering in Italian, probably asking us to leave. But I couldn't move. My legs felt like lead, my heart a raw, bleeding thing. Ethan turned away, signaling to his friends. "Let's go," he said, like I was a nuisance to be left behind again. Caleb scooped up his broken phone, cursing under his breath. The others followed Ethan, their chairs scraping as they stood. I stood frozen, my suitcase at my feet, the crowd's stares boring into me. I wanted to scream to make him feel the weight of what he'd done, but my voice was gone, swallowed by the void he'd left. Ethan glanced back once, his expression blank, and then he was gone, disappearing into the night, leaving me shattered alone, with nothing but the echo of his words and the wreckage of our love. The cafe's lights blurred as Ethan and his friends vanished into the night, their laughter a fading echo. I stood there, my suitcase a silent witness, the crowd's stares heavy on my skin. My arm still stung where Ethan had grabbed me, his words "you never fit in" carving a hollow space inside. I wanted to collapse, to let the ground swallow me, but something sharper stirred, a flicker of defiance beneath the pain. I wasn't going to stay here broken for him to pity or mock. Not anymore. I turned back to the train station, my steps unsteady but deliberate. The platform was still alive with travelers, their voices a distant hum. I rejoined the ticket line, my hands steadier now, counting my euros again. The clerk, a tired woman with pinned-up hair, slid a ticket to Rome across the counter. "Last train tonight," she said, her English clipped. I nodded, clutching the ticket like a lifeline. Rome was a chance to breathe, to think, to be anywhere but here. The train was crowded, the air thick with the smell of coffee and sweat. I found a seat by the window, my suitcase wedged beside me. As the train lurched forward, the town's lights slipped away, replaced by dark fields and scattered stars. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, my reflection pale and unfamiliar. A child across the aisle, no older than 5, giggled as she unwrapped a candy. She caught my eye and held it out, her small hand steady. "For you?" she said, her accent soft. I hesitated, then took it, the sweetness sharp on my tongue. Her mother smiled, and I managed a nod, my throat tight. That small kindness felt like a crack in the wall I'd built around myself. I unwrapped the candy's foil, smoothing it flat on my lap. My mind churned. Ethan's cruelty had stripped me bare, but sitting here moving forward, I felt a spark of control. I couldn't go back to Ohio, to the life I'd let him shape. I needed something new, something mine. In Rome, I'd figure it out. I had to. I pulled out my notebook, the one I'd filled with angry scrawls. My pen hovered, then pressed to the page. "I'm done being your shadow," I wrote. "This is for me now." Rome greeted me with chaos, a swirl of honking scooters and crowded sidewalks. I found a pawn shop near the station, its window cluttered with watches and rings. My wedding band felt heavy in my pocket, a relic of promises that never held. I slid it across the counter to a grizzled man with thick glasses. He inspected it, muttering in Italian, then offered a sum that made my stomach twist. It wasn't much, but it was enough for a ferry ticket to Greece, a place I'd once dreamed of visiting, back when dreams felt possible. I took the cash, my finger bare now, and walked out lighter, but raw. At the port, I bought a ticket to a small Greek island. The name unfamiliar, but the idea intoxicating. The ferry was a hulking beast, its deck crowded with tourists and locals. I leaned against the railing, the sea air sharp and salty. A woman beside me, her hair streaked with silver, struck up a conversation. Her name was Sophia, a painter from Athens traveling to visit her family. "You look like you're starting over," she said, her eyes kind but piercing. I didn't deny it. "Maybe I am," I said, surprised by my own honesty. Sophia's laugh was warm, and she told me about her village, a place of whitewashed houses and olive groves. "Come stay with us," she said, almost offhand. "My mother makes the best bread." I blinked, caught off guard. I barely knew her, but the offer felt like a rope thrown to a drowning woman. I nodded, my voice quiet. "Okay," I said, "just for a few days." She grinned like it was settled, and I felt something shift inside me, a quiet strength taking root, urging me to keep moving forward, to choose myself, even if it scared me. The ferry hummed beneath my feet, cutting through the dark sea toward the island. Sophia stood beside me, pointing out constellations, her voice a steady anchor. I clutched the railing, the cash from my wedding ring, a small weight in my pocket. Selling it had felt like shedding a skin, painful but necessary. I wasn't just running from Ethan. I was reaching for something I'd lost long before he left me. The stars above seemed brighter, like they were daring me to keep going. We arrived at dawn, the village a cluster of white houses nestled against green hills. Sophia's family home was small, with a stone courtyard and a table piled with figs and cheese. Her mother, Eleni, greeted me with a hug, her hands rough from years of kneading dough. "You're too thin," she said, her English broken but warm, pushing a plate toward me. I ate the bread, soft and warm, and for the first time in days, I felt human. Sophia showed me to a spare room, a simple space with a woven rug and a window overlooking the sea. I set my suitcase down, its weight lighter now, like it carried less of my past. That afternoon, Sophia took me to the village square, where women sold pottery and men played cards under olive trees. She introduced me to a friend, Marina, who ran an art studio. "You paint?" Marina asked, her eyes curious. I hesitated. "I used to," I said, my voice soft. "Back in college, before Ethan, before I let my sketchbooks gather dust." Marina handed me a flyer for a painting class, her smile encouraging. "Try it," she said. "First one's free." I tucked the flyer into my pocket, my fingers brushing the ferry ticket stub. The idea of painting again felt reckless, like stepping into a version of myself I'd buried. But Sophia's nod, her quiet confidence, pushed me. "I'll go," I said, surprising myself. Marina clapped like it was a done deal, and I felt a spark, small but real. The next morning, I walked to the studio, a sunlit room with easels and jars of brushes. The class was small, just a handful of locals and a German tourist. Marina stood at the front, her hands stained with paint. "Paint what you feel," she said, "no rules." I stared at the blank canvas, my brush hovering. My mind went to Ethan, to the cafe, to his cold eyes. But then I thought of the child's candy on the train, of Sophia's laugh, of Eleni's bread. I dipped the brush in blue, the color of the sea outside, and started. The strokes were clumsy, at first my hands unsteady. But as the canvas filled, something loosened in me. I painted waves, jagged and wild, then softer, curling into calm. Marina watched, her brow furrowed. "It's raw," she said, not unkindly, "but you're holding back." Her words stung, but they were true. I'd spent years holding back for Ethan, for everyone. I nodded, gripping the brush tighter. "I'll keep going," I said, my voice firm. That night, I sat with Sophia and Eleni, a glass of wine in my hand. Eleni told stories of her youth, of leaving an unkind husband, of rebuilding alone. In Greek, we say, Anastasi. She said, her eyes bright. It means rising again. She taught me the word, her voice steady, and I repeated it, the syllables heavy on my tongue. Later in my room, I opened my notebook, the one I'd filled with rage and fear. I tore out a fresh page and wrote a letter to Ethan. "I'm done," I wrote. "I'm choosing me. Divorce is coming." I folded it, tucking it into my bag, not ready to send, but knowing I'd meant every word. I stepped outside the village quiet, the sea a dark shimmer below. I painted Anastasi on a small canvas, the letters bold against a sky of stars. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I set the canvas on the windowsill, the paint still wet, and stood there, the night air cool on my face. My heart beat steady, not with anger, but with purpose. I wasn't whole yet, but I was moving, and that was enough. The village woke early roosters crowing as sunlight spilled over the hills. I stood in the courtyard, my canvas of Anastasi drying against the wall, its bold letters a quiet vow. The letter to Ethan, still folded in my bag, felt like a weight I wasn't ready to lift. Writing it had been my first real step, but now the world was responding, and I wasn't sure I was ready for what came next. Sophia found me there, a basket of laundry in her arms. "You're up early," she said, her smile soft. "Big plans." I shrugged my fingers, tracing the canvas edge. "Just trying to keep moving," I said. She nodded like she understood more than I'd said and invited me to the weekly market. "It'll be good for you," she said. "Sell something, make a start." The idea of showing my work even a small piece made my stomach twist, but I agreed. I chose a simple painting, a swirl of sea and sky, and followed her to the square. The market was alive stalls brimming with olives, honey, and woven scarves. Locals bartered loudly, their voices mingling with the clink of coins. I set up my canvas on a borrowed table, feeling exposed, like I was offering a piece of my soul. A woman paused, her hair pinned in a bun, and studied the painting. "It's striking," she said, her English careful. How much? I stammered, a price low enough to feel safe. She paid without haggling, tucking the canvas under her arm, and I stared at the euros in my hand, stunned. It was real, a small victory, but mine. More came, drawn by curiosity. A man bought a sketch I'd done of the village hills, praising its detail. A teenager lingered, asking how I mixed the blues. Each sale chipped away at my doubt, building something solid in its place. By noon, I'd earned enough to cover a week's rent for a tiny studio I'd seen near the church, a room with bare walls and a single window. I signed the lease that afternoon, my name on the paper, a declaration. This was my space, my beginning. Sophia celebrated with me over coffee, her eyes bright. "You're blooming," she said, and I wanted to believe her. But the high faded when I returned to the house, my bag heavier with the unsent letter. I sat on the bed, the room's quiet, pressing in. I'd started over, but Ethan was still a shadow. His betrayal, a bruise that hadn't healed. I wondered where he was, if he even cared. The thought made my chest ache, not with longing, but with the fear that I'd never fully escape him. That evening, Eleni cooked lamb, the smell filling the house. We ate outside the table lit by lanterns. Sophia's brother Nico joined us, his laugh easy as he poured wine. He worked at a cafe in the village, a place I'd passed but never entered. "You're the artist," he said, raising his glass. "Heard you're taking over the market." I blushed, brushing it off, but his warmth was steady grounding. After dinner, he mentioned the cafe needed a server. "It's not glamorous," he said, "but it's steady." "You in?" I hesitated, the idea of a job, a routine feeling both daunting and right. "I'll try it," I said, my voice quiet but sure. The next morning, I woke to a knock. Sophia stood at the door, her face pale. "Someone's here," she said, her voice low. "Says he's your husband." My heart stopped. "Ethan." I followed her to the courtyard, my legs numb. There he was, leaning against a rented scooter. His shirt rumpled, his eyes scanning the house. "Clara," he said, stepping forward, his voice softer than I'd ever heard. "I messed up. I'm sorry. Can we talk?" I froze, the air thick with his presence. The village, my paintings, the studio, Nico's offer. All of it felt fragile now, like he could unravel it with a word. His apology hung between us, tempting, but his eyes held something else, a flicker of the same man who'd left me. I stood there, my hands clenched, the weight of my new life colliding with the ghost of my old one, and I couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't trust the ground beneath me. Ethan's voice lingered in the courtyard, his apology a thin thread stretched across the space between us. I stood rooted, the morning sun warm on my skin, but a chill ran through me. Sophia hovered nearby, her basket of laundry forgotten, her eyes darting between us. Ethan stepped closer, his hands open like he was offering something real. "I've been looking for you, Clara," he said, his tone low, almost pleading. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It was a stupid joke. A joke. The words sliced through the fragile world I'd built here, the studio, the market, Nico's cafe offer. I wanted to laugh, to let the bitterness spill out, but my mouth stayed shut. His face was softer now, the hard edges from the cafe gone, but I saw the flicker in his eyes, the same one that had dismissed me, mocked me. I crossed my arms, my nails digging into my palms. "You drove off," I said, my voice steady but cold. "You left me with nothing." "That's not a joke." He flinched, his shoulders sagging. "I know," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I was angry, okay? You were always so uptight, and I lost it. But I'm here now. Let's fix this." His words were careful, rehearsed, like he'd practiced them on the way here. I searched his face for the man I'd married, the one who'd carried me over the threshold of our first apartment, but he wasn't there. This Ethan was a stranger, grasping for control. Sophia cleared her throat, her voice sharp. "Maybe you should go inside, Clara," she said, her gaze fixed on Ethan. I nodded, grateful for the escape, but Ethan followed his steps quick. "Wait," he said, his hand brushing my elbow. I jerked away, my skin crawling at his touch. "Don't," I said, my voice a whisper, but it carried the weight of everything he'd done. He stopped, his hand falling, his eyes narrowing with something like frustration. Inside, the house was cool, the smell of Eleni's herbs faint in the air. I led him to the kitchen, needing walls around us, something solid. He sat at the table, his posture slouched, like he was the one wronged. I stood by the counter, my back to the window, the village's hum distant now. "Talk," I said, my voice flat. He leaned forward, his hands clasped. "I messed up, Clara," he said. "I got caught up with the guys and it went too far. But we're married. We can work through this." "You don't throw away 2 years over one mistake." "One mistake." The phrase was a spark igniting the anger I'd buried. I thought of the hostel, the fountain, the pawn shop, where I'd sold my ring. I thought of Anastasi. The word Eleni had taught me the rising I was fighting for. "This wasn't one mistake," I said, my voice low, each word deliberate. "You chose to humiliate me. You chose to leave me. And now you think you can just show up and fix it." His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I saw the old Ethan, the one who'd snap when I pushed back. "You're not perfect either," he said, his voice rising. "Always nagging, always judging. You pushed me to this." The accusation landed like a stone, heavy and cold. I stared at him, my breath shallow. He was rewriting our story, making me the villain, and it hurt more than I expected. Not because he was right, but because he believed it. I turned away, my hands gripping the counter. "Get out," I said, my voice barely audible. Ethan stood his chair, scraping the floor. "Clara, come on," he said, his tone softer now, coaxing. "We're better than this." I didn't answer. I couldn't. The room felt too small, his presence too large. He lingered, then walked out the door, clicking shut behind him. I sank to the floor, my back against the cabinet, the tiles cold under me. The silence was deafening, heavier than his words, heavier than the life I'd left. I'd chosen myself, but the cost was this, a hollow ache, a truth I couldn't unsee. Ethan was gone, and so was the woman I'd been. I sat there staring at the empty table, my heart quiet, my strength fraying, and let the weight of it all settle. The kitchen floor was cold under me, long after Ethan left, his footsteps fading into the village's morning hum. I stayed there, curled against the cabinet until the light shifted, slanting through the window in soft gold. My hands were still, my heart quiet, not with peace, but with a strange emptiness, like the calm after a storm. I'd sent him away, chosen my own path, but the weight of that choice settled now, heavy and real. I wasn't sure what came next, only that I couldn't go back. I stood, my legs stiff, and stepped outside. The courtyard was empty. Sophia and Eleni gone to the market. The air smelled of jasmine, the village waking in slow, steady rhythms. I walked toward the sea, drawn to its vastness, my sandals crunching on the gravel path. The beach was a narrow strip of pebbles, the water lapping gently, a deep blue that seemed to hold secrets. I sat on a smooth rock, the waves' rhythm steadying my breath. For the first time in weeks, I let myself just be, no plans, no fears, just the sound of the tide. My mind wandered, not to Ethan, but to the girl I'd been before him. Back in Ohio, I'd loved quiet mornings, curling up with a book, dreaming of places like this. I'd wanted to travel, to paint, to live boldly. But somewhere along the way, I'd let those dreams shrink, fitting them into Ethan's world. Now here I was, in a Greek village, starting over. The thought didn't spark joy, not yet, but it carried a faint promise, like a seed waiting for rain. I pulled out my phone, the screen cracked from days of rough handling. A new email from Hannah sat in my inbox, her name a tether to home. I hesitated, then opened it. Her words were gentle but firm. "Clara, I'm worried. You haven't called. Come home, please. We'll figure this out together." I stared at the screen, picturing her in our childhood kitchen. Her hair tied back, her voice steady. She'd always been my anchor, the one who'd bandage my scraped knees, who'd listen when I rambled about books. But going home meant facing the pity, the questions, the version of me I'd left behind. I typed a reply, then deleted it. I wasn't ready to explain, to say I was staying, that this village with its stone paths and salty air was where I needed to be. Instead, I pocketed the phone and stood brushing pebbles from my skirt. The sun was higher now, warming my shoulders. I walked back to the village, the sea's murmur fading behind me. Eleni's house came into view, its shutters open, a faint hum of voices inside. I paused at the gate, my hand on the latch, feeling the shift inside me. I wasn't healed, not fully, but I was here, present, and that was a start. Eleni was in the kitchen, chopping onions, her knife a steady rhythm. She looked up, her eyes soft but searching. "You're back," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Sit. Eat." I smiled, sliding into a chair. She set a plate of tomatoes and feta before me, the colors bright against the wood. We talked not about Ethan, but about her life, her stories unfolding like a map. She spoke of her first love, a fisherman who'd promised the world but left her with nothing. "I learned to trust myself," she said, her voice low. "You will too." Her words settled in me, not as a lesson, but as a truth I was beginning to feel. I ate slowly, the feta sharp on my tongue, and felt the village around me, its sounds, its life. I wasn't running anymore, not from Ethan, not from myself. I was standing still, letting the pieces of me find their place. The thought was fragile, but it held me like the rock by the sea, steady and unyielding. Eleni's kitchen faded behind me as I stepped into the afternoon light, the village square beckoning. The air was thick with the scent of grilled fish and blooming oleander. I carried a small canvas one I'd painted for the upcoming festival, a simple scene of the village at dusk, its rooftops glowing under a fading sky. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, a piece of me I was ready to share. The act of carrying it felt like a quiet promise, a way of rooting myself here. The square was bustling, preparations for the festival in full swing. Women strung lights between lampposts, their laughter soft, while children darted through the crowd clutching paper flags. I found Marina near a stage arranging tables for the art display. She took my canvas, her eyes scanning it with a nod. "This is good, Clara," she said, her voice matter-of-fact. "It belongs here." I mumbled thanks. My cheeks warm, but her words settled in me, steadying something that had long been unsteady. I wandered to a quiet corner of the square where an old man sold candles from a cart, their wax carved with intricate patterns. I picked one, its scent sharp with lavender, and handed over a coin. "For the church," he said, pointing to a stone building across the way. I hadn't planned to go, but my feet carried me there, the candle warm in my hand. The church was small, its walls worn smooth by time, the air cool and heavy with incense. I lit the candle, its flame flickering in the dim light, and set it among others, their glow a silent chorus. I sat in a pew, the wood creaking under me, and let my thoughts drift. Not to Ethan, not to the pain, but to the life I was building. The studio's bare walls, Nico's easy laugh at the cafe, the way Sophia's voice lifted when she spoke of her dreams. These were my anchors, now not promises or vows, but moments small and real. I thought of Hannah's email, her plea to come home. I pulled out my phone, the screen's glow harsh in the church's quiet, and typed a reply. "I'm staying," I wrote. "I'm finding my way. I'll visit soon. Love you." I sent it, my fingers steady, and felt a weight lift, not all of it, but enough. The church door creaked open, a woman slipping in to light her own candle. I watched her, her hands slow and deliberate, and felt a kinship not in our stories, but in the act of choosing to keep going. I stood, my candle's flame still burning, and stepped outside. The square was brighter now, the festival's energy rising. I paused, my eyes catching a streak of light in the sky, a shooting star, fleeting but clear. It wasn't a sign, not really, but it felt like a breath, a moment where the world paused with me. I walked back to the square, my steps light the canvas's absence, a reminder of what I'd given. The crowd's hum wrapped around me, not isolating, but inviting. I wasn't whole, not yet, but I was here with these people, and that was enough. My heart beat slow, steady, not with triumph, but with a quiet certainty. I stopped by the festival's edge, the village glowing under the strung lights, and stood there, letting the night hold me, letting myself rest. The festival lights glowed against the night, casting a warm haze over the village square. I stood at the edge, my hands tucked into my pockets, watching families dance to a fiddler's tune. My canvas hung among others on a wooden stand, its colors soft but bold, a quiet claim to this new life. A woman approached, her shawl loose around her shoulders, and pointed to my painting. "That's yours?" she asked, her accent thick. I nodded, my voice steady. She smiled, saying it reminded her of home, and I felt something settle in me, a root taking hold. The festival was a blur of music and laughter, but I moved through it slowly, savoring each step. Nico waved from his cafe's stall, pouring wine for a line of locals. Sophia danced with a group of girls, her skirt twirling, her grin wide. Eleni sat nearby, her hands folded, watching the crowd with a calm pride. I joined her, sliding onto a bench, the wood cool under me. You're part of this now, she said, her eyes on the dancers. I didn't answer, but my chest warmed like her words were stitching me into this place. Later, I helped Marina pack up the art display, my canvas now marked with a small ribbon, a modest award. She handed it to me, her smile rare but genuine. You've got something, Clara, she said. Keep going. I tucked the canvas under my arm, its weight light but grounding. The square was emptying, the music fading, and I walked to the studio, my steps sure. The room was still bare, but I'd hung a few sketches on the walls, their lines a map of who I was becoming. Inside, I set the canvas on a table and opened my journal, its pages worn from months of confessions. I wrote about the festival, the ribbon, the way the village had folded me in. But my pen slowed as I thought of Ethan, not with anger, but with a strange clarity. I'd forgiven him not for his sake, but for mine. Holding on to the hurt was like carrying a stone, and I was tired of its weight. I closed the journal, my hands steady, and stepped outside, the night air crisp. The village was quiet now, the festival's echo gone. I walked to the cliff's edge where the sea stretched dark and endless below. The stars were sharp, each one a pinpoint of light. I thought of Hannah, her email still unanswered beyond my brief reply. I pulled out my phone and dialed the signal, weak but enough. She answered on the second ring, her voice soft with sleep. Clara, she said, worry threading through. I'm okay, I said, my voice calm. I'm staying here, but I'll visit soon. We talked not about Ethan, but about her garden, her new job, the small things that tied us. I hung up my heart full, knowing she'd wait for me. Back at the studio, I lit a lamp, its glow soft against the walls. I picked up a brush not to paint, but to clean it, the ritual soothing. The act was small, but it was mine, a rhythm I'd built. I thought of the woman who'd landed in Italy, lost and broken, and saw how far I'd come. Not perfect, not whole, but steady, like the sea below, moving even in its calm. I set the brush down, my breath slow, and stood in the quiet, letting the night wrap around me, letting myself be. The studio's lamp flickered as I stood there, the night's quiet, wrapping around me like a shawl. I walked to the window, the village dark, except for a few glowing windows, each a small story of its own. My reflection stared back, not the woman who'd clung to Ethan's promises, but someone new, carved by choices and time. I thought of the festival, the ribbon on my canvas, the way Nico's laugh had warmed me, the way Eleni's hands had steadied me. This life, small as it was mine, built from the ashes of what I'd lost. I sat on the floor, my back against the wall, and opened my journal one last time. The pages held my rage, my fear, my slow climb back to myself. I wrote not about Ethan, but about the village, its rhythms, its people. I wrote about the sea's patience, the way it shaped the cliffs without hurry. And then, without planning, I wrote about me. I'm enough. I wrote the words simple but heavy, not because I'm perfect, but because I'm here, trying every day. That was the lesson, the one I'd carried through Italy's cobblestone streets and Greece's sunlit hills. It wasn't about winning or proving Ethan wrong. It was about choosing myself, even when it hurt, even when it meant walking alone. I'd spent years waiting for someone else to see my worth, to hand me a map for my life. But worth isn't given. It's claimed in the quiet moments, in the decision to keep going, to paint, to laugh, to live. I closed the journal, my fingers tracing its worn cover, and felt a stillness, not loud, but deep, like the sea at dawn. The next morning, I walked to the cafe, my apron slung over my shoulder. Nico was there, wiping down tables, his grin easy. You're late, he teased, tossing me a rag. I laughed, the sound freer than it had been in months. I worked the morning shift, pouring coffee, chatting with locals, my hands steady. The routine was small, but it anchored me a thread in the fabric of this place. I thought of Hannah, of home, and knew I'd visit, but not yet. This was where I belonged for now, in this village with its salty air and open hearts. I stepped outside during a break, the sun high, the square alive with vendors and chatter. A group of children played nearby, their chalk drawings bright against the stone. One girl, her braids swinging, was sketching a dog, its lines rough but bold. It reminded me of the stray I'd seen in Italy, the one that had watched me in my lowest moment. I smiled, kneeling beside her. "That's beautiful," I said. She beamed, offering me a piece of chalk. I drew a star, its edges uneven, and she laughed, adding her own. We sat there, drawing in the sun, and I felt whole, not because the past was gone, but because I'd made room for this, for joy, for me. The lesson wasn't just mine. It's for anyone who's been left behind, who's felt small, who's wondered if they're enough. You are. Not because someone says so, but because you choose to show up, to rebuild, to love yourself through the cracks. I stood brushing chalk dust from my hands and looked at the village, its colors vivid, its life steady. I was home not forever, but for now, and that was enough. What's a moment that made you choose yourself? Share it in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. If this resonated, give it a like, subscribe for more, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for listening, for being here. Keep walking your path, and may you find peace in every step.